Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The night air shimmered faintly over London, rippling with quiet magic that no muggle could see. In the upper floors of the Ministry of Magic, where the corridors curved like labyrinths of glass and shadow, Hermione Granger moved swiftly. Her wand light flickering along polished stone, she had stayed late again. It was hardly unusual. Since peace had been declared, Hermione had taken her place at the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and thrown herself into her work with relentless purpose. Some said she never learned to rest. Others whispered that she feared what silence might bring. Tonight, however, something was different. She had been asked to review a set of ministry reports concerning discrepancies in the Department of Mysteries, missing items, unaccounted experiments, sealed records that seemed to have vanished entirely. It was dull work at first glance, but Hermione noticed patterns that others had overlooked. Magical signatures erased, storage spells undone, security wards not broken but unwoven, as though by someone who knew their precise structure, and all of it done quietly, methodically, and without any trace left behind. By midnight, she had spread dozens of parchments across her desk. Candlelight danced over her notes, revealing the careful hand of someone chasing a mystery with scholarly precision. She paused only to sip from a cup of strong tea, muttering to herself, "If you can enter without detection, you must have clearance. And if you can alter the warding, you must understand its design." Her quill tapped the parchment. The logical conclusion formed in her mind, unpleasant but inevitable. Someone inside the Department of Mysteries is doing this. A faint rustle echoed from the corridor. Hermione froze, wand raised. But when she stepped into the hall, the shadows lay undisturbed. Only the low hum of the Ministry's night charms filled the air. Still, she couldn't shake the unease. The Department of Mysteries had always been secretive, even to other Ministry divisions. Its unspeakables, wizards and witches sworn to absolute silence, worked on matters so complex and dangerous that few outside ever even heard rumors of them. The idea that one of them might be acting against the Ministry's interests was more than troubling. It was dangerous. She returned to her office, sealing the door with a protective charm, and spread open an old folder she had found buried in the archives. It contained fragments of research into a spell called Obliviora Totalis, an ancient, incomplete enchantment theorized to erase not just individual memories, but shared history itself. Most had dismissed it as legend. Yet, according to the files, fragments of that spell had been housed in the Department of Mysteries' Hall of Thought, and now those fragments were missing. Hermione's quill hesitated over the parchment. If this spell were ever completed, entire events could vanish as though they had never happened. The war, the victory, even Harry's name. Her stomach turned cold. The next morning she met with Kingsley Shacklebolt, still serving as Minister for Magic. His calm presence filled the office like sunlight through high windows. "You're suggesting," Kingsley said gravely, "that someone's attempting to finish a spell capable of rewriting history?" Hermione nodded. "And they have access to the Ministry's deepest chambers. It has to be someone on the inside, an unspeakable or perhaps someone posing as one. Kingsley steepled his fingers. We cannot risk panic. If the public hears even a whisper of this, the ministry's credibility will crumble. Do you have a plan? Hermione's eyes were steady. Yes, but it will require me to disappear for a while. Kingsley raised an eyebrow. I'll use Polyjuice Potion. Assume a new identity. Join the Unspeakables undercover. If the thief is among them, I'll find out who and how far they've gone. You'd be alone, he said quietly. I know, she replied, but the key is to remain unnoticed. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Kingsley stood and placed a hand on her shoulder. You've always had more courage than sense, Hermione Granger. But if anyone can see this through, it's you. That evening, as twilight deepened over the Thames, Hermione brewed the potion herself. Steam curled up in silver threads, carrying the sharp scent of lacewing flies and fluxweed. Into the cauldron she dropped a single strand of auburn hair, not her own, but taken from an Unspeakable's cloak she'd quietly borrowed from the records office. When the potion turned the right murky hue, she raised the goblet, whispered, "For the truth," and drank. The transformation was quick and unsettling. Bones shifting, vision blurring, a new face staring back from the mirror. Her brown curls were gone, replaced by sleek, dark hair. Her eyes, once bright amber, were now a cool shade of gray. She tucked her wand into her cloak and left her flat with no trace behind. Every charm erased, every step silent. By the next morning, the name Hermione Granger would appear absent from ministry attendance records. Her desk would stand empty, her files sealed. No one, not even Harry or Ron, would know where she'd gone. And deep within the Department of Mysteries, in the corridor where time itself seemed to hum, a new recruit walked silently past the spinning spheres of prophecy, her expression unreadable, her purpose clear. She'd vanished from the world she knew, and her hunt had begun. The air within the Department of Mysteries was unlike any other in the ministry. It was still and cool, heavy with a faint, ever-present hum, a sound that seemed to come not from the walls, but from the fabric of time itself. The hallways were circular, their black stone glinting faintly with shifting runes, and the ceiling was so high it vanished into mist. Hermione, or rather, the witch she had become under the Polyjuice's disguise, one Maris Vale, walked among the Unspeakables in silence. All wore the same deep blue robes marked with silver sigils of secrecy. Their faces were unreadable, their footsteps soundless. They passed one another like shadows. No one spoke unless necessary. Even their thoughts seemed hushed. For 3 days Hermione studied their work, careful never to draw attention. She observed the protocols, the strange rhythm of life beneath the ministry, records sealed by touch, research conducted wordlessly through enchanted quills, doors that opened only when certain runes were whispered into being, and always the feeling that she was being watched. Her official assignment was to assist in cataloging unstable enchantments, magical remnants left behind by incomplete spells. It sounded dull enough to keep her out of notice, but the files she handled were anything but ordinary. Here were fragments of thought given form, bottled echoes of memories, even a crystal sphere that pulsed faintly with whispered voices from long-vanished wizards. Each night, when her shift ended, Hermione lingered behind, under the pretext of organizing records. When the others left, she quietly examined the locked sections of the Hall of Thought, searching for any clue about the missing spell fragments. On the fourth night, she found it. Hidden in a row of dusty glass drawers lay a parchment fragment, its edges burned, the ink shifting faintly as if alive. The title, Obliviora Totalis, was scrawled in archaic runes. Beneath it, a partial translation. To unmake remembrance, one must bind thought to void. To preserve control, one must stand unseen. Hermione's heart quickened. The handwriting matched that of old research files she had seen in the archives, those of Cassian Murr, an unspeakable, long-presumed dead. She had read about him once, a brilliant enchanter obsessed with memory alteration. Fired from the department for illegal experiments on muggles, he had vanished before his arrest. If he still lived? Hermione's wand hand trembled slightly. Could Murr have infiltrated the department once more? As she pondered, a flicker of movement caught her eye. In the reflection of the glass, a figure stood behind her, silent, cloaked, watching. She spun, wand raised. "Who's there?" But the corridor was empty. Only the low hum remained. For a heartbeat, she considered retreating, but reason overruled fear. She slipped the parchment fragment into her sleeve and sealed the drawer again. Just as the distant sound of footsteps echoed through the hall, quickly she extinguished her wand light and retreated into one of the circular doors. The chamber beyond was vast and dim, lined with swirling globes of mist. Each orb held fragments of emotion, grief, joy, rage, study by unspeakables to understand the nature of human thought. She pressed herself against the cold wall, scarcely daring to breathe. The footsteps drew nearer, slow, deliberate, unhurried. Then came a man's voice, soft but resonant. "Curiosity can be fatal in these halls, Miss Vale." Hermione froze. The man stepped from the shadows. His robes were darker than the others, trimmed with a thread of silver so faint it seemed to drink the light. His face was gaunt, but his eyes gleamed with intelligence and something else, something colder. I was only cataloging," she managed, keeping her voice steady and slightly different than her own. "The records from Section 3. He raised a hand. "No need for lies. I admire curiosity. It keeps the mind sharp. Tell me, have you ever considered how fragile memory truly is?" The question sent a chill through her. "Memories define us," Hermione said cautiously. "Ah," the man murmured, stepping closer. "But they also imprison us. They bind us to pain, to fear, to guilt. What if you could choose what to remember? What if an entire world could begin anew, freed from its burdens?" She forced herself to meet his gaze. "That would be theft, to take away what makes us who we are." The man smiled faintly. "You sound very much like someone I once knew." He turned, his robes swirling, and for an instant the dim light caught the edge of his wand, a wand carved from bone-white ash, its handle marked with runes identical to those on the stolen fragment. "My name is Murr," he said softly, "and you, Miss Vale, should learn when to stop asking questions." Before she could speak, he flicked his wand. The mist-filled orbs shuddered violently, bursting into clouds of raw emotion, anger, despair, terror. The chamber roared to life as thousands of whispering voices filled the air. Hermione stumbled back, clutching her wand, shielding her mind from the onslaught. Murr's voice echoed through the chaos. "Some memories deserve to die, wouldn't you agree?" He vanished into the mist, leaving her gasping amid the storm of living thoughts. It took her nearly an hour to subdue the chamber, dispelling the unleashed enchantments and restoring order. By the end, her strength was nearly spent, her hands trembling. When silence finally returned, she stood amid the ruins of the spilled memories, heart pounding. There was no longer any doubt. Cassian Murr was alive, and he was inside the department. That night, back in her small ministry quarters, Hermione sat at her desk, her disguise still in place, and began to write a message on enchanted parchment, coded so only Kingsley could read it. Confirmed Murr alive, working within the department. Motive, completion of Obliviora Totalis, immediate action required. But as she went to seal it, the ink shimmered, then vanished before her eyes. The parchment turned blank. She stared in shock. Someone had intercepted her message before it even left the room. A soft whisper seemed to brush her ear. "You cannot warn them, Hermione." Her breath caught. The room felt colder. Every protective ward she'd cast that morning now shimmered faintly, distorted, as if rewritten. She realized with dawning horror that Mir hadn't just escaped detection, he had already begun to alter memory itself. The hunt had become more dangerous than she'd imagined, and if she failed, the world might forget there had ever been a Hermione Granger at all. Morning never truly touched the lower levels of the ministry. The corridors of the Department of Mysteries seemed to exist outside the rhythm of day and night, sealed beneath stone and secrecy. Yet to Hermione, disguised still as Maris Vale, the dawn brought a new, grim purpose. Sleep had eluded her entirely. The whisper she'd heard, the voice that knew her name, still coiled like ice in her chest. She could not risk sending another message. The wards around her quarters had been compromised. Every word she wrote, every charm she attempted, shimmered and dissolved, as though the air itself watched and obeyed someone else. So she turned instead to the one thing no spell could alter: reason. She dressed swiftly, concealing the burnished scar left on her wrist from the night before, a mark Murr's magic had carved when the emotional storm burst loose. Then she strode into the department, her steps purposeful, her thoughts sharper than fear. If Murr was working inside these halls, he must have help. Even he could not infiltrate the ministry alone, and that meant she had to find the ally before the ally found her. The day passed in quiet unease. Unspeakables moved through the chambers like shades, each mind sealed, each task secret. Hermione caught subtle glances from a few of them, nothing overt, but something watchful, speculative. Once, as she crossed the Hall of Prophecy, a silver sphere flickered and whispered her true name before dimming again. She stopped dead, breath caught in her throat before forcing herself onward. That evening she lingered once more in the Hall of Thought. Dust motes drifted like pale sparks around her wand light. She had returned to the drawer where she'd found the parchment, only to discover it empty. Even the faint magical residue was gone. Someone had erased the evidence. Too thorough, she murmured to herself. He's covering his trail faster than I can follow it. A low voice spoke from the doorway behind her. You shouldn't be here after hours. Hermione turned swiftly, hand on her wand, but the speaker was a young witch she recognized from her first day, pale-haired, quiet, with ink-stained fingers. She went by the name of Lydia Brooke and had barely spoken a word in the days since Hermione's arrival. I was finishing the inventory, Hermione said evenly. Lydia stepped closer, her expression unreadable. They say you're meticulous. I've heard Murr noticed you. Hermione kept her face impassive. I've only met him once. Lydia tilted her head, eyes glinting. Once is enough for him to remember. A pause stretched between them, then Lydia's voice dropped to a whisper. If you wish to survive here, Maris Vale, do not look for what's been hidden. Some knowledge doesn't wish to be found. Before Hermione could question her, Lydia turned and slipped away, vanishing into the next corridor like smoke. Hermione stood still, listening to the fading echo of footsteps. It could have been a warning or a threat. Either way, it meant Lydia knew something. She followed. The corridors twisted, leading deeper than she had yet ventured, past the known chambers into narrow passages where the air grew cold and the walls thrummed faintly with magic. Ahead, Lydia's faint silhouette descended a spiral stair. Hermione moved soundlessly after her. They emerged into a vast underground hall she'd never seen marked on any map. The chamber was circular, filled with tall glass columns that pulsed faintly with silvery light. Suspended within each column was something terrible and beautiful, a memory, pure and whole, drawn from human minds. They floated like spirits in the light, and at the center stood Cassian Murr. Hermione froze, her heart hammering. He was facing Lydia, speaking in a low voice. She dared edge closer, just enough to hear. "The fragment you retrieved is incomplete," he was saying. "We need the final rune from the Hall of Records. Without it, the spell will collapse before the weave is stable." Lydia's voice trembled. "I've tried, but the ward on that chamber, no one can pass without the minister's seal." Murr turned slowly, his expression as calm as ever. "Then we take the seal." He raised his wand, and for an instant, Hermione glimpsed the faint shimmer of a spell forming around Lydia's head, a memory charm, complex and delicate. "No," Hermione whispered before she could stop herself. The sound carried. Murr's head snapped toward the shadows. The spell dissolved in his hand, and his eyes gleamed like molten glass. "Ah," he said softly, "our observer returns." He moved faster than thought, casting a binding charm that struck the floor inches from her boots. Hermione dodged, the polyjuice disguise flickering slightly under the strain of her defensive spell. She retaliated with a silent, stunning spell, but Murr deflected it with casual grace. "You don't belong here," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "No unspeakable fights like that. Who are you, truly?" The potion's effects began to wane. Hermione could feel it, the tightening of her skin, the tremor in her magic. She had only moments before her true face returned. She raised her wand high, summoning a burst of light so bright it blinded them both. The glass columns shuddered, memories within rippling like silver waves. Then she ran, sprinting through the maze of shadows, the thunder of spells behind her. She burst into the stairwell, her disguise collapsing completely. Her reflection in a mirrored surface caught her eye, her own face once more, pale, breathless, eyes wide with fear and fury. She raced through the twisting halls, the air thick with Murr's voice, calling after her. "You can run, Hermione Granger, but the past will not protect you. I can erase it." A curse struck the wall beside her, exploding stone and showering her with dust. She dove through a doorway, sealing it behind her with a quick charm. Then, gasping, she leaned against the cold stone, forcing her breathing steady. She was back in the Hall of Time now, the chamber where great, fragile clocks turned endlessly, measuring the flow of hours and years. Their ticking filled the silence like a heartbeat. She moved among them, mind racing. Mirror had allies, Lydia among them, perhaps unwillingly, and he needed the minister's seal to access the final rune. That meant Kingsley himself was in danger, but she could not warn him. Every magical communication she tried was intercepted. She needed a way out, an untraceable route to the surface. As she turned toward the exit, One of the time turners on the central pedestal began to tremble violently. Hermione halted, wand raised. The golden device spun of its own accord, faster and faster, until the air around it blurred. Then, from the shimmer, an image formed, not of the past, but of the near future. She saw Kingsley's office dimly lit and Myrrh standing behind the minister, wand drawn. The vision lasted only seconds, but it was enough. Hermione's decision was instant. She seized the time turner, ignoring the alarm spells that flared across the chamber, and twisted at once. The world blurred into streaks of gold and shadow. A sound, like rushing wind, filled her ears. And then she stood within the minister's office, moments before dawn, her heart hammering and the golden sand of time still glowing faintly in her hair. Kingsley sat at his desk, startled.
Hermione? How? But before he could finish, the door burst open. Cassian Myrrh stepped through, calm, precise, and already aiming his wand. The trap had begun to close, and Hermione was right in its center. The golden light from the time turner had not yet faded when Hermione threw herself between Kingsley and Myrrh's wand. The office erupted in motion, scrolls scattering, parchment flying like startled birds. Myrrh's curse struck the far wall, scorching the polished wood with a hiss of green flame. "Protego," Hermione cried, her shield charm forming just in time to deflect the second curse. Kingsley dove aside, drawing his wand in one smooth movement. "Myrrh," he said grimly, "I had hoped the rumors were false." The unspeakable stepped through the settling smoke, his face lit by the eerie glow of the curse still simmering in his wand tip. "Minister," he said softly, "you of all people should understand. The past is a chain. I would set us free." "By erasing what we fought for?" Hermione demanded, Myrrh's gaze fixed on her. "Ah, Miss Granger. I should have known you'd meddle. You cannot bear the idea of not knowing, can you? Even when ignorance might save you." "Knowledge never destroys," she said sharply. "Only those who twist it do." For an instant something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He raised his wand again. "The key to salvation lies in silence. Allow me to teach you that." Before he could strike, Kingsley's voice boomed, "Expulso!" The explosion of energy shattered the glass windows, flinging Myrrh backward through the swirling smoke. He landed with unnatural grace, robes rippling like shadows. Hermione seized the moment, casting a binding charm, but Myrrh only laughed. With a gesture, he summoned a shroud of mist that filled the room, swirling like a storm of half-formed memories. Images flickered in the vapor, faces, voices, echoes of the war. Harry, Ron, Dumbledore, all illusions conjured from Hermione's own recollections. Myrrh's voice whispered among them, "Do you see, Hermione? These ghosts weigh you down. Every sorrow, every death. Wouldn't you rather forget?" She clenched her jaw, forcing her mind to focus. "He's inside your thoughts. Don't let him in." Then she realized the danger. Kingsley, though strong, was struggling to see through the fog. He couldn't distinguish illusion from reality. Myrrh used the distraction to circle behind him, wand raised. "Stupefy!" Hermione shouted. Her spell struck Myrrh square in the chest, sending him reeling, though not fallen. The mist shattered like glass. Kingsley, breathing hard, steadied himself beside her. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Neither should he," Hermione replied. "He's after your seal. He needs it to complete the spell." Kingsley's eyes hardened. "Then he will fail." But Myrrh had already recovered. "You cannot fight me both," he hissed.
With a flick of his wand, the door behind him burst open, and two unspeakables stepped through, their faces masked, their wands raised. Lydia Brooke was among them. Her expression was blank, her eyes glazed, controlled. "Stop this, Lydia," Hermione called. "He's using you." "She can't hear you," Mir said. "Her memories are already mine." Anger flared in Hermione's chest. She turned her wand toward Lydia, casting a complex counter-charm that shimmered blue. The young witch staggered, clutching her head, the enchantment flickering. Mir retaliated instantly, but Hermione deflected his curse into the floor, splintering stone. The battle turned fierce, spells ricocheting, chairs bursting into flames, portraits fleeing their frames in panic. Hermione's mind raced, searching for any weakness. Mir's magic was too strong, too deliberate. She needed to disrupt his concentration. Then she saw it, the faint silver chain around his wrist, etched with runes, a memory anchor. It tethered him to his stolen power, the vessel linking his mind to the fragments of Obliviora Totalis. She darted left, ducking behind Kingsley's desk as another curse scorched the air above. Her fingers brushed the fallen shards of the time turner at her feet. Gold dust clung to her skin. An idea struck her, reckless but possible. "Kingsley," she whispered, "trust me?" He nodded once, eyes sharp with understanding. Together they feigned retreat. Mir advanced, confident, his wand-light gleaming cold white. "At last," he said softly, "the heroes who cannot let go of the past will vanish with it." Hermione stepped into the open. "You're right about one thing," she said. "The past is powerful. That's why it remembers even when you wish it gone." And with that she flung the fragments of the time turner toward him and cried, "Tempus vincula!" The golden dust exploded mid-air, merging with the spell's energy. Time itself stuttered. The room froze, candles halted mid-flicker, smoke curling motionless. Even sound vanished. Only Hermione, Kingsley, and Mir stood unfrozen within the golden haze. What have you done?" Mir demanded, his composure breaking. "I've bound us outside the flow," Hermione said, stepping forward. "You can't alter memories if time itself refuses to move." He snarled and lashed out with a curse, but the air resisted his magic, absorbing it into the suspended light. His runes flared wildly, the chain on his wrist cracked, sparks flying. "Without your anchor," Hermione said, her wand steady, "the spell collapses. You'll lose everything you've stolen." He tried to cast again, but the runes exploded in a burst of white light. Mir cried out, clutching his wrist as the golden haze consumed him. For an instant his eyes met hers, filled not with hatred but sorrow. Then the world snapped back into motion. The room shook with released magic. Kingsley shielded them both as the explosion tore through the office. When the light faded, Mir was gone. No body, no trace, only the faint smell of burned ozone and a scattering of silver dust where he had stood. Hermione lowered her wand slowly. "He's not dead," she murmured. "He's been pulled into the spell's void." "Trapped between moments," Kingsley said. "Then let him remain there." But Hermione's gaze fell on Lydia, unconscious on the floor. She knelt beside the young witch, casting gentle diagnostic charms. The control runes on her temples were fading, but not gone. When Lydia's eyes fluttered open, they were filled with tears. He said he could make it better," she whispered, "that the pain would stop." Hermione's expression softened. "He lied. The only thing worse than pain is forgetting why it mattered." They carried Lydia to St. Mungo's that night, ensuring her safety before returning to the ministry. Kingsley ordered the Department of Mysteries sealed for investigation, its wards reset from the foundation up. When all was done, dawn broke over London. Hermione stood by the shattered window of Kingsley's office, watching the sunlight creep over the city rooftops. Her reflection stared back, tired but resolute. Kingsley joined her. "You saved us again, Hermione. Though I wonder what it cost you this time." She smiled faintly, but her eyes were distant. "I don't know," she admitted. "When the spell broke, I felt something slip away. A memory, maybe. I can't recall what. Some memories return in time," he said. "Or they don't," she murmured. "Perhaps that's the price of being unnoticed." She turned from the window, cloak swirling, and walked down the long corridor of the ministry as the morning light grew stronger. Behind her, the faint golden dust on the floor glimmered once, just once, before fading into nothing. And far away, in a place beyond time's reach, Cassian Muir opened his eyes to darkness, surrounded by the endless echoes of memories, not his own. The story was not yet done.
But for now, Hermione Granger's name remained remembered, and the world still safe. Days passed, yet the ministry did not feel safe. The battle with Myrrh had left unseen cracks in its foundations, cracks not of stone, but of memory. Whispered conversations halted when Hermione passed. Files she had sworn she'd written herself appeared altered, words rearranged or missing entirely. And sometimes, in the glass reflections along the corridors, she thought she glimpsed the faint outline of a man watching her, Myrrh's face, pale and distant, half caught between worlds. Kingsley ordered the Department of Mysteries sealed, and every unspeakable questioned. But something in the air remained wrong. Even when Hermione reviewed the official records, half of what had occurred seemed to fade at the edges. When she tried to write a report of the events, her quill hesitated, and the ink itself blurred, as though reality rejected her recollection. It was then she began to suspect that Muir was not truly gone. Late one evening, when the ministry was nearly empty, Hermione returned to the Hall of Time. The golden devices there, turners, hourglasses, and orbs of suspended light, gleamed faintly, casting ripples of reflection across her face. She approached the central pedestal, where the fractured remains of the great time turner she had used lay sealed under glass. For a long time, she simply stared. Her mind replayed that final instant. Myrrh's eyes, before the explosion, not filled with rage, but sorrow. It had not been the look of a man destroyed. It had been the look of one departing by choice. She cast a revealing charm over the fragments. The dust shimmered, forming symbols she did not recognize, ancient, deliberate, interlocking like pieces of a puzzle. It was then she realized this was not residue of destruction. It was a trail. Myrrh had left a message. Hermione pressed her wand to the sigil, murmuring a translation charm. The symbols reformed into words, cryptic but legible. Memory is not a river but a sea. Even erased things sink, waiting to be found. The meaning chilled her. Myrrh had not erased himself. He had submerged. Before she could study further, footsteps echoed behind her. Hermione extinguished the light and turned, wand ready. "Easy, Granger," said a familiar voice. Ron Weasley stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of tea. His red hair gleamed faintly in the dimness, though his eyes were shadowed with worry. "You're not supposed to be here," she said quietly. "Neither are you," he answered, offering one of the cups. "But you never were good at supposed to." Hermione hesitated, then accepted it. The warmth grounded her. Ron glanced at the sealed glass, then back at her. Kingsley told me what happened, or what he thinks happened. Said you saved his life. I only bought us time, she said softly. Still counts. For a while, they drank in silence. The hum of time filled the chamber. Finally, Ron said, "You think he's still out there?" "I know he is," Hermione whispered. "He's changed the nature of his existence. He's hiding between moments. That's why people are forgetting details. He's tampering with fragments of time piece by piece, trying to finish the spell from within the void." Ron frowned. "You mean he's using time itself as a memory?" "Exactly." Her eyes gleamed. "If he learns to manipulate that sea completely, he could rewrite everything from the inside. We wouldn't even know it had happened." "Blimey," Ron muttered. "And how do we stop a man who doesn't technically exist anymore?" Hermione sighed, setting her cup down. "By finding him where he's hiding. We need someone who can see the boundaries between memory and time." Ron tilted his head. "You're thinking of Luna, aren't you?" "Yes," Hermione said. "She's studied Veil-related anomalies since the war. If anyone understands how to reach what's beyond the known world, it's her." Within the hour, they were standing in the dim attic of Luna Lovegood's home, its walls covered in maps of starlit constellations and parchment sketches of strange, half-seen creatures. Luna herself appeared barefoot and serene, a silver pendant glowing faintly against her robes. "Hermione," she said dreamily, "I wondered when you'd come. You've been flickering for days." Hermione blinked. "Flickering?" "Your presence," Luna explained calmly, "like a candle in wind. Some of you keep slipping sideways. That's what happens when time tries to forget you." Ron looked alarmed. "Is she saying—" "Yes," Hermione interrupted, her voice tight. "The spell's still affecting me. Myrrh linked my essence to his when I stopped him. I'm being pulled toward the same void he fell into." Luna nodded, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Then, we'll need to go there before you disappear completely." Hermione stared. "You know how to reach it?" "Oh yes," Luna said, "through the veil. It's not only for the dead, you know. It's for lost memories, too. But we'll need something that belongs to him, something that still remembers his existence." Hermione's thoughts leapt to the chain, the runic silver band Myrrh had worn. "The memory anchor," she said. "It's shattered, but fragments might remain at the ministry." "Bring it," Luna said serenely, "and hurry. Once the void fully forms, time won't let you enter again." The following night, Hermione returned to the sealed office where Myrrh had vanished. The silver dust still lingered faintly in the cracks between the floorboards. She gathered it carefully into a crystal phial, whispering a preservation charm. The air around her pulsed faintly, as though aware of her intrusion. When she returned to Luna's home, the moon had risen high, pale and sharp. Luna had drawn a circle of runes on the floor, their glow soft and steady. In the center stood the ancient black arch of the veil, an artifact once stored deep within the ministry's death chamber, now in Luna's protection for study. Its curtain shimmered faintly, whispering voices that seemed to shift between languages. Hermione hesitated. "If I go in, you might not come out," Luna said simply. But if you don't, soon you'll fade anyway." Ron gripped her shoulder. "We'll be right here when you come back. Just don't forget which way's home, yeah?" Hermione smiled faintly. "I'll remember." She stepped into the circle. The runes flared as she uncorked the phial, letting the silver dust rise into the air. The veil responded instantly, its whispering deepening into a steady pulse. Luna's voice was calm. When you enter, think only of what you seek, nothing else. Hermione nodded once, then with a final breath she stepped forward. The curtain's fabric was colder than ice. For an instant there was nothing but darkness, and then she was falling through light, through memory, through the very fabric of her own mind. She landed softly upon a surface that was neither ground nor air. A sea of shifting reflections. Faces drifted beneath her feet like ghosts within water. She saw herself as a child at Hogwarts, saw the trio fighting at the Battle of Hogwarts, saw Dumbledore's army, the victory feast. All of it shone dimly like echoes of forgotten dreams. And there, standing upon the mirrored horizon, was Cassian Murr. His robes moved like smoke. His face was calm, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. "I knew you would follow," he said quietly. "You cannot help it, Hermione Granger. You're too loyal to the truth." She raised her wand. "You wanted to be found." "Perhaps," he said. "But tell me, if you could erase the war, the pain, the loss, would you?" Her voice was steady. "No, because pain teaches us who we are." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. "Then you'll never understand." And before she could answer, he raised his hand, and the sea of memories rippled to life, pulling her under. Hermione gasped as visions engulfed her, her parents' faces fading from memory, Ron's laughter turning to silence, the halls of Hogwarts dissolving into mist. But deep within her mind she clung to one thought, one truth she refused to lose. "I am Hermione Granger, and I remember." The world of reflections trembled. The pull weakened. She opened her eyes to find Murr watching her, astonishment written across his face. "You resisted it?" he whispered. Hermione stepped forward, wand blazing. "Because I have something you never had. And what is that?" "Hope." The sea erupted in light, and the void began to break. The light burst outward, so bright it seemed to pierce the very bones of the world. Hermione felt herself lifted, drawn into the heart of that brilliance, as if the memories around her had gathered in rebellion against Mir's dominion. Images spun through the glow. The castle towers of Hogwarts, the banners of the Great Hall, the laughter of friends, the silent courage of the fallen, all surged upward in a flood of remembrance. Murr staggered beneath it. The sea of memory boiled, its mirrored surface shattering into shards of light. He thrust his hands toward the current, his voice rising above the roar. "You cannot stop what is already undone." Hermione's answer came steady and sure. "Then I'll remake it." She raised her wand high, channeling the full strength of her will into a single incantation. "Reverto Memoria." The light obeyed her call. It surged around her, swirling into a vortex that blazed through the void. Every memory Mir had stolen, every thought he had caged flew free, drawn back to their rightful owners across time and distance. The void screamed, a sound not of voice but of unraveling itself. When the storm subsided, silence fell. Hermione found herself standing once more upon the surface of the memory sea, now calm and clear as glass. The reflections beneath her feet glimmered softly, moments restored, wounds mended, truths remembered. Murr knelt before her, his robes tattered, his form half-transparent as though already fading from existence. His voice trembled, stripped of arrogance. "You've undone my work. But at what cost, Hermione Granger? You have bound yourself to memory's weave. When the world recalls, it will recall through you." Hermione felt the truth of his words like cold water down her spine. The memory still flowed through her, tens of thousands of threads intertwining with her own thoughts. She could feel their weight, their sorrow, their joy. "I'll bear it," she said quietly. "Better that one remember too much than all forget entirely." Mur looked up at her, his expression no longer cruel, but almost mournful. "You think memory is mercy?" he said. "It is a prison. You'll learn that soon enough." He reached out as though to touch her arm, but his hand passed through her like smoke. His form dissolved, scattering into 1,000 faint sparks that sank into the sea and were gone. Hermione stood alone in the vast stillness. For a moment she thought she would fall, her knees weakened by exhaustion, her mind heavy with the weight of so many lives. But then a sound broke through the quiet, a faint humming, distant yet familiar. She turned toward it and saw a faint light, shimmering far away like a doorway, glimpsed through fog. "The way back," she whispered. The path beneath her feet rippled, solidifying with each step she took. Around her, the sea of memory began to fade, dissolving into mist as she moved toward the light. Every few paces, she caught glimpses of faces she knew. Harry's determined eyes, Ginny's fierce grin, Ron's hand reaching for hers. They seemed to urge her onward. When she reached the light, she hesitated. It pulsed gently, as though alive, as though waiting for her decision. She whispered, "Luna, if you can hear me, pull me home." And then she stepped through. The veil's curtain shuddered. Luna staggered back, shielding her eyes from the burst of white that erupted from its depths. Ron, standing beside her, gripped his wand tightly, his heart hammering. "Is she?" he began. Before he could finish, Hermione fell through the arch, collapsing onto the floor. Her robes were scorched, her face pale, but her chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths. "Hermione?" Ron dropped to his knees beside her, shaking her shoulder. "Come on, you're all right. You're all right." Her eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked lost, disoriented. Then recognition dawned, and she smiled faintly. "Ron, you remembered." He frowned, bewildered. "Of course I did." But Luna, her wide eyes glowing in the light, murmured. Not everyone did. They helped Hermione to her feet. Around them, the runes on the floor had gone dark. The veil was still again, its whisper silent for the first time in centuries. Hermione steadied herself, her voice hoarse. "It's done. He's gone." Luna tilted her head. "Not gone," she said softly. "Just remembered differently." Hermione's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Luna pointed toward the window where dawn's first light was breaking over the hills. "Look." Outside, the world seemed subtly altered. The snow that had blanketed the ground the night before was gone, replaced by dew-damp grass. The air smelled fresher, as though a season had changed in a breath. Hermione felt the shift in her bones, the delicate tremor of time rearranging itself. She closed her eyes and searched her mind. Her memories were intact, but threaded with new strands she did not recognize. A child's laughter in a place she'd never been. A battle fought in a forest she did not recall. Thousands of borrowed moments carried back with her from the sea. "Merlin's beard," Ron murmured. "You've got the whole world in there." Hermione managed a tired smile. Just the parts that were almost lost. The ministry confirmed her return within hours. Kingsley himself met her at the atrium, his relief evident. "You vanished for 3 days," he told her. "We feared the worst." 3 days? Hermione echoed faintly.
It felt like a lifetime. He nodded, studying her face with quiet concern. You did it, didn't you? The records have restored themselves. Files that were missing for months now stand whole again. Myr's research is gone, erased entirely. The spell is broken. Hermione exhaled, her shoulders sinking with exhaustion. It's over, she said. But even as she spoke, she could not shake the feeling that something unseen lingered just out of reach. That night, she returned to her small flat, its walls lined with books and half-finished projects. She sat by the window, quill in hand, trying to write what had happened. Yet every time she began, her thoughts tangled and the words refused to form. She sighed and set the parchment aside. When she finally rose to extinguish the lamps, a faint shimmer caught her eye. On the mirror by her desk, a message had appeared in thin silvery script. The past endures because someone remembers. Hermione reached out to touch the writing, and it vanished beneath her fingers. Outside, the moon hung low, bright and full. The city slept in quiet peace. Unaware that it had almost been rewritten, she leaned against the window frame, the night wind brushing her hair, and whispered, "You were wrong, Myr. Memory isn't a prison. It's a promise." Somewhere far beyond time's edge, in the depths of the void, a flicker of light stirred, one last remnant of Cassian Myr, watching, listening, perhaps even understanding. But in the world of the living, Hermione Granger closed her eyes at last. The whispers faded. The danger had passed. And as dawn broke over London once more, she slept, dreamless, at peace, yet carrying within her the living memory of all that must never be forgotten. The months that followed were quieter, yet never simple. The world went about its business, unaware of how close it had come to being rewritten. In the ministry, the staff whispered that the Granger affair, as they called it, had sealed the last of the ministry's dark gaps. But Hermione knew better. Spells as ancient as Obliviora Totalis did not simply vanish. They slumbered, waiting for the right mind, the right ambition to wake them once more. Still, she resumed her work. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement needed her. The wizarding world needed stability, and Hermione, ever tireless, gave it all she had. Yet when night came and the corridors fell silent, she often found herself standing before the window of her office, watching the city lights blur into gold and silver. It was in those quiet hours that she heard them, faint echoes, half-formed voices in her memory. They were fragments of others' lives, shadows of those she had saved when she restored the world's lost memories. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes, she could see through their eyes. A young witch in Peru studying a rare magical bird, a child in the highlands laughing beside a brook, an old wizard in Cairo deciphering runes beneath the stars. Their joys and sorrows flickered at the edges of her consciousness, and though she felt their weight, she never turned them away. One evening, as the autumn wind swept over London, Hermione received an unexpected letter. It bore no signature, only a wax seal stamped with the emblem of the Department of Mysteries, a circle within a circle surrounded by runes. The parchment inside was brief, written in elegant script. "The Hall of Thought stirs again. One of the mirrors has spoken your name." Hermione's breath caught. The Hall of Thought had been sealed since Myr's disappearance. No one, not even Kingsley, had dared reopen it. Yet now, she did not hesitate. Within the hour, she was descending the familiar spiraling stair into the depths of the ministry,
her wand casting a soft glow along the black stone walls. The air was cold, dense with the hum of contained power. When she reached the great circular door of the hall, the sigils on its surface pulsed faintly, recognizing her magic. The door opened with a whisper. The chamber beyond was vast and still. Tall mirrors lined the walls, each holding within its surface the faint shimmer of captured thought. In the center stood a pool of silver liquid, the mind's mirror, the heart of the hall. It reflected no one's image, only the shifting currents of unseen memory. Hermione stepped closer, her reflection rippling and reforming in strange, distorted patterns. The mirror seemed to breathe. Then faintly, a voice rose from its depths, soft, yet unmistakable. Hermione Granger. Her heart stopped. It was his voice, Cassian Murs. She raised her wand. "Show yourself." The mirror's surface trembled, and within its depths, the faint outline of a face appeared. Mur looked older now, translucent as mist, his expression calm and strangely sorrowful. "You still keep vigil?" he said. "You cannot leave it alone." Hermione steadied her breath. "You're a fragment, not an echo left behind." "An echo, yes, but not without purpose." His gaze sharpened. "You carry what I sought, the sum of memory itself. I told you once it would imprison you, and now you see the bars, don't you?" "I see only the duty I accepted," she said firmly. "Duty," he murmured almost to himself, "a noble word for a chain." The mirror darkened, and Hermione felt a pressure against her mind, like cold fingers pressing at the edges of her thoughts. Mur's voice grew softer, almost tender. "You hear them, don't you? The borrowed lives, the echoes of all you restored. They call to you because they are still bound to you." Her wand flared. "You have no power here, Mir." But he only smiled. "I have all the power you gave me. When you undid my spell, you took my place in the weave, and now the weave begins to fray again." The silver surface of the mirror rippled violently, and for a heartbeat, Hermione saw scenes flash across it. A village with its name missing from maps, a wizard searching for a wife whose face he could no longer remember, a child weeping over an empty photograph. "Mir," she whispered, "what have you done?" "Nothing," he said. "It is you. Every memory you hold draws power from the world that birthed it. You are unraveling time without meaning to." She staggered back, her thoughts spinning. Could it be true? Had her act of salvation carried its own curse? "Release them," Mir urged softly. "Set the memories free, let them fade, and you will be free too." Hermione shook her head, her jaw set. "If I let them go, the world forgets again. I won't let history vanish." "Then you will vanish," he said simply. The mirror's glow intensified, the light turning harsh and white. Hermione's wand vibrated in her grip as the air thickened with energy. The mirrors along the walls began to tremble, their surfaces rippling with stolen voices. She raised her wand high, shouting above the rising hum, "Finite Memoria!" The command burst from her like lightning. The mirrors cracked, shards flying outward in a storm of glimmering glass. The mind's mirror screamed, a terrible ringing sound that echoed like 1,000 overlapping voices. Mur's image fractured, his form breaking into a web of silver light. Hermione fell to her knees as the spell consumed the chamber. When the sound died, all that remained was silence. The mirrors were gone, reduced to dust. The pool of silver had stilled, reflecting nothing, and Mur's voice was gone at last. She knelt there for a long time, trembling, her breath ragged. Then slowly she realized something within her had changed.
The chorus of foreign memories that had haunted her for months was gone. Her mind was quiet for the first time in years. She rose, unsteady but whole. Perhaps she had finally done what he asked, released them all. Yet as she turned to leave, a faint shimmer caught her eye on the far wall. Etched into the black stone, glowing faintly, were words, written not in Myr's hand but her own. Remember me only when it matters. Her chest tightened. She could not recall writing them, yet the truth of them felt ancient, familiar. She touched the words and they faded like breath on glass. When she returned to the surface, dawn had broken over London. The city was alive again. The hum of carriages, the distant murmur of the river, the rustle of life returning. Hermione stepped into the sunlight, closing her eyes against its warmth. For the first time, she could not recall every detail of the past. Small things had slipped away. The color of Luna's pendant, the exact sound of Ron's laughter that night by the veil. But the emptiness did not frighten her. It was peace. Perhaps she thought Myr had been right about one thing. To remember everything was to carry a weight no one could bear. And so, walking through the golden morning, Hermione Granger made her choice not to forget, but to live. The world had memory enough to hold its own stories. Hers would remain in silence, where only truth, not legend, could find it. Yet far below, deep in the sealed darkness of the Hall of Thought, one unbroken mirror gleamed faintly still. Its surface rippled once, and in its depths a whisper echoed softly, "The key is to remain unnoticed." The weeks rolled onward, each one carrying Hermione farther from the storm of the Hall of Thought. She told herself it was finished, that Myr's echo had faded, that the magic binding her to the past was gone. The world moved forward, as it always did. Leaves turned gold. Rain polished the cobblestones of Diagon Alley, and the hum of ordinary life returned to the wizarding world. But still, some nights, she woke in darkness with the sense that something watched her. The shadows in her flat seemed too deep, the air too still, as though time itself held its breath. She would light her wand, whisper a charm of warding, and remind herself that ghosts could not harm the living, especially those who had learned to live with ghosts. It was on one such night that an owl arrived, tapping urgently against her window. Its feathers were the pale gray of ash, its eyes sharp and knowing. The parchment it carried bore no seal, no name, only a few words scrawled in an elegant, familiar hand. "Come to Godric's Hollow, midnight alone." She read the note twice, her pulse quickening. There was no signature, yet she felt the old pull of something unfinished. At midnight, the village lay steeped in silence. The moon was thin, the air cold enough to sting her lungs. Hermione walked the familiar path past the ruined cottage that had once belonged to Harry's parents. The monument stood quiet in the dark, its carvings gleaming softly in the moonlight. She paused, her breath fogging in the air, before continuing toward the small churchyard beyond. A figure waited by the graves, cloaked, motionless. Her wand rose at once. "Show yourself." The figure turned. A hood fell back, revealing not Myr, not a man, but a woman. Her hair was silver white, her eyes a pale, eerie blue that seemed to hold reflections of countless lifetimes. "I have been looking for you, Hermione Granger," the woman said, her voice calm, almost kind. "Who are you?" Hermione demanded. "Someone who remembers what others have forgotten." The woman's gaze swept over the churchyard. Cassian Myr was not the first to walk the border of memory and time. He merely stumbled upon it by accident. I was one of those who built it. Hermione frowned. You're saying you helped create Obliviora Totalis? In its earliest form, the woman said, before it was corrupted. It was meant to heal, not destroy, to help those broken by grief. But the Ministry feared it. They buried the research and silenced the ones who knew. Myrrh tried to reclaim it and lost himself. And you, her voice softened, you took his place. Hermione's hand tightened on her wand. If you've come to finish his work, you'll find I'm not so easily swayed. The woman shook her head. No, I came to warn you. The balance you restored is slipping. Memories are bleeding together. You've begun to share your mind with others, haven't you? Dreams that aren't your own. Glimpses of strangers' lives. Hermione hesitated, and that was answer enough. The weave is unraveling, the woman continued. When you shattered the mirrors, you freed too much too fast. The world remembers more than it can hold. Without a guardian to contain it, the tide will rise until memory itself drowns the present. Hermione swallowed hard. Then tell me what to do. You must return to the place where it began, said the woman. To the original sanctum, the first hall of thought. It lies beneath the ruins of Camelot, where magic and memory were once one. Only there can the weave be rewoven. Hermione stared. Camelot is a legend. So is Hogwarts to some, the woman said with a faint smile. But legends endure because they are remembered. Before Hermione could respond, the wind shifted, and the figure began to fade. Wait, Hermione cried. Who are you? The woman's voice drifted through the mist. A librarian of what was lost. Remember my name if you can. It will guide you when the path turns dark. Ellawen. And then she was gone, leaving only the soft rustle of autumn leaves and the faint scent of wildflowers long dead. Hermione stood motionless for a time, the name echoing in her mind. Then she turned toward the road back to London, the old spark of resolve rekindled in her chest. If the world's memory was unraveling, she would mend it. Her search began in the archives of the Ministry, deep within the restricted collections of magical history. The old tomes spoke of Camelot not as a Muggle myth, but as the heart of an early wizarding order, the Aurelians, guardians of pure magic. Their records hinted at a sanctum beneath the ruins, protected by enchantments woven from living memory. After weeks of study, Hermione found what she sought. A map drawn in ancient ink, its lines faint but clear. The entrance, it claimed, lay hidden in the cliffs of Tintagel, veiled by spells of misdirection. At dawn she set out alone. The Cornish coast greeted her with mist and salt wind. Waves crashed against the cliffs below as she climbed the narrow path, her cloak whipping in the gale. The sky was bruised with cloud, but her wand cast a steady golden light ahead. At last, she reached a narrow arch of stone carved with worn runes. The symbols were familiar. She recognized them from the mirror chamber. Though older, purer, she pressed her hand to the stone, whispering a translation charm. The air shimmered. A passage opened before her, spiraling down into the earth. She descended, her wand light reflecting off walls that glowed faintly with embedded crystal. The deeper she went, the quieter the world became, until all she heard was the slow rhythm of her own heartbeat. Then she reached it, the sanctum of memory. The chamber was vast, carved into the rock itself, its walls alive with light. Threads of silver and gold wove through the air like strands of silk, pulsing softly with the rhythm of thought. At the center stood a great crystal orb suspended above a pedestal. Within it, currents of memory flowed endlessly. a vision of time unbroken. Hermione stepped forward, awe washing over her. She could feel the weight of centuries here, the knowledge of countless minds, the unspoken histories of the world, but woven among them was something darker, a pulse of unrest, a whisper like 1,000 overlapping voices struggling to be heard. She approached the orb and laid her hand upon it. A shock ran through her, sharp and electric. Images flashed behind her eyes, the mirror hall, Myr's face, Eloan's pale gaze, and beneath it all, the vast, churning sea of remembrance she had once crossed. A voice spoke, not Myr's, not Eloan's, but something older, vast as time itself. Keeper of memory, it said, you bear the weight of remembrance. Will you bind it anew, or let it drown the living? Hermione's breath came fast. If binding it will save the world, then yes. To bind memory is to surrender it, the voice warned. You will forget what you love most. Only in forgetting can the weave endure. She froze. Faces flashed through her mind. Harry, Ron, Ginny, Luna. The laughter, the battles, the friendship that had carried her through every darkness. But beyond that, she saw the countless others whose lives depended on the world remaining whole. Her voice trembled, but her resolve did not. Then take what you must. The light engulfed her. She cried out as memories tore free, bright threads of her life unraveling into the air. The sound of Ron's laugh faded. The scent of the Burrow's kitchen, the echo of Dumbledore's voice, the taste of victory, all dissolved like mist. But even as she forgot, she held to one last thought, one last promise. The key is to remain unnoticed. When the light dimmed, she stood alone in the silent chamber. The orb pulsed steadily once more, the weave restored. Hermione looked down at her hands, uncertain where she was or why she'd come. Her name lingered faintly on her lips, unfamiliar and fragile. And somewhere far above, the world remembered her, though she no longer remembered herself. When she woke, the sea was the first thing she heard, a slow, rhythmic roar that spoke of distance and endlessness. For a long while she lay still, her mind a blank page. She did not know where she was, or who she was. The name that should have risen from her heart like a breath was gone, replaced by a strange calm, as though the absence itself were her only memory. She sat up slowly. Around her stretched a wide, windswept shore, the sand silver in the morning light. Far off, the ruins of an old castle clung to the cliffs above the surf, its stones black with age. Her wand lay beside her on the sand. She picked it up instinctively, feeling its weight settle into her hand with the comfort of an old friend. The word came without thought. Lumos. Light flared at the tip. She exhaled shakily. Magic. She could do magic. That meant something. That had to mean something. She rose, brushing the sand from her robes, and turned her gaze toward the castle. If there were answers anywhere, they would be there. The climb up the cliffside was steep, the wind sharp and cold, but she moved with a strange surety, as though her body remembered where her mind could not. At the top she found the remnants of a stone stair, half buried in moss, leading into what had once been a grand hall. Ivy and time had swallowed much of it, yet traces of beauty remained. Arched windows filled with broken glass, carvings of stars and dragons, symbols that whispered of forgotten kings. She wandered through the ruins, touching the walls as though to wake them. The air hummed faintly with ancient enchantments, sleeping still. Then, as she crossed what might once have been the throne room, her foot struck something half buried in the dust, a a fragment of crystal no larger than her palm, glowing faintly with an inner light. When she lifted it, the glow brightened. The surface rippled, and for a moment she saw her own face reflected within, but older, fiercer, eyes filled with purpose. The vision spoke her name, soft as a sigh. Hermione. The name hit her like a rush of wind. She stumbled, clutching the crystal. Hermione. The word fit, familiar and right, like a door unlocking deep inside her. Memory did not return all at once. It came in fragments. The scent of parchment and ink, laughter by a fire, the sound of a friend's voice calling her name in battle. She sank to her knees, pressing the crystal to her chest. I'm Hermione, she whispered, Hermione Granger. And with that truth spoken, something stirred. The castle trembled faintly, the air thickening with magic. From the shadows of the ruined hall, a figure stepped forward, tall, robed in gray, with eyes as deep as the sea. You remember, said the stranger, and the voice was both kind and ancient. Hermione rose, her wand in hand. Who are you? I am the warden, the figure replied, guardian of this place, keeper of what lies beneath it. You are the one who bound the weave. I don't understand, she said. I don't remember. The warden inclined his head. You gave your memories to save the world from itself. You wove them into the roots of time so that the past would remain whole, but nothing given in magic is ever lost. It waits to be found again. And now the weave trembles. What was bound too tightly begins to strain. Hermione felt a cold shiver run through her. You mean it's breaking? Not yet, said the warden, but the balance falters. You, who once carried the world's memories, must now decide what remains and what fades. She shook her head. I can't. I don't even know what I've done. You will, he said, and extended his hand. Come. The sea remembers what you cannot. He led her down through a narrow passage that spiraled deep beneath the ruins until the sound of the waves grew loud once more. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern where water lapped the stone floor. The air shimmered with faint light, reflections from countless fragments of crystal that floated like stars above the water's surface. Each shard pulsed with faint images, faces, places, moments, frozen in time. Hermione stepped closer, entranced. She reached toward one and saw within it a vision of a young boy holding a wand for the first time, his eyes bright with wonder. Another showed an old witch tending to a phoenix in a sunlit garden. They are memories, said the warden. The oldest, the smallest, the ones forgotten even by those who lived them. You stored them here when you wove the spell. They have waited for you. Hermione touched one gently. They're beautiful. They are fragile, the warden said. The sea carries them, but the tide grows restless. The weave strains because the world clings to too much. Every thought, every fear, every sorrow, it all demands to be remembered. Soon there will be no room left for the present. Hermione looked around, overwhelmed. What must I do? He gazed at her solemnly. You must choose. You may release them all, let the sea of memory wash clean and start anew. Or you may bind them once more, holding the weight of remembrance within yourself again. But if you do, the forgetting will never end. You will lose yourself each time you save the world. Her hand trembled. To forget again? To vanish from her own life? From those who loved her? She could not bear the thought. Yet the alternative, to let the world forget its history, was unthinkable. I can't choose, she whispered. The warden's eyes softened. Then let the truth guide you. He raised a staff and the water brightened. Look. The surface of the sea shifted, revealing visions. London at peace, Hogwarts thriving, children laughing as they practice simple charms. But beneath those images, another vision formed. The faint shimmer of the weave itself, vast and delicate, woven through all things. And within it a single glowing thread, the mark of her own magic, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. It called to her. Hermione stepped into the water. It was cool but welcoming, curling around her ankles, her knees, until she stood waist-deep in its glow. She raised her wand, the crystal fragment in her other hand, and whispered, "Show me what to keep." Light surged upward, enveloping her in warmth. Memories flowed through her, too many to count. The joy of first friendship, the sting of loss, the triumph of courage. She saw faces she had forgotten, felt the pull of countless lives brushing against her own. Then came a voice, gentle, distant, beloved. "Hermione," it said, "whatever you do, we'll remember you." Her heart broke with the sound of it. When the light dimmed, she stood alone again. The cavern was silent. The sea was calm. Around her, most of the crystals had faded, their light gone, but a few still shone, bright and steady. She turned to the warden. "I kept enough," she said softly. "The rest is free." He bowed his head. "Then the balance holds." Hermione felt no triumph, only quiet peace. The ache of forgetting lingered, but it no longer frightened her. She had done what must be done. As she climbed back to the surface, dawn broke once more over the cliffs, painting the sea in gold. The wind carried with it a whisper of voices, not words, but gratitude. When she reached the edge of the world and looked down upon the waves, she smiled faintly. Somewhere deep within her, she still felt the pulse of memory, the heartbeat of a world that would never again be lost. And though she could not recall every name, every face, she remembered enough to know who she was. Hermione Granger, keeper of what must never be forgotten and guardian of what must sometimes be let go. The path away from Tintagel wound through mist and heather, the air crisp with salt and morning dew. Hermione walked alone, her cloak damp with the breath of the sea, the distant roar of waves echoing behind her. Each step carried her farther from the place of memory, yet she could feel the thread she had restored, still pulsing faintly within her. The weave lived, the balance held, and yet, even as peace settled over the land, a shadow lingered at the edges of her mind, a whisper of something unfinished. By nightfall, she reached a small inn in the nearby village. The fire burned low, the scent of peat thickened the air. The innkeeper, a kindly old wizard with clouded eyes, welcomed her without question, offering food and a room. Hermione thanked him quietly and sat by the hearth, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that steamed like silver mist. She tried not to think, but the silence left room for thoughts to creep in. There were fragments that refused to settle, faces half remembered, laughter she could not name, and one faint image that returned again and again. A pair of gray eyes watching her from beyond a mirror. Murr's face, or perhaps not, perhaps something older that had worn his shape. Still chasing ghosts, are we? Hermione looked up sharply. A man had taken the seat across from her, tall and lean, his travel cloak stained by rain. His hair was dark with streaks of white, his expression calm, almost amused. There was something disarming in the way he spoke, too familiar for a stranger. "Do I know you?" she asked, wary. Once, perhaps, the man said, or perhaps I only know the story of you. He reached into his cloak and set a small object on the table, a shard of glass, clear as water and faintly glowing from within. Hermione's breath caught. She knew that light. Where did you get that? It washed up on the shore this morning, the man said. A fisherman found it tangled in his nets. It hums with magic. I thought you might recognize it. She touched the shard cautiously. The hum of energy beneath her fingers was unmistakable, the same resonance as the mirrors in the Hall of Thought, as the weave itself. Yet this fragment felt different, not of the past, but of what was still to come. This isn't from the hall, she murmured. It's new. The man nodded slowly. The sea doesn't give back what it has swallowed, Miss Granger. If it returns something, it's because it wants to be remembered. Hermione's wand hand tightened under the table. Who are you? He smiled faintly. A collector of stories, and perhaps a messenger. You've set much right, but every spell leaves a scar. You've bound the weave, but there's a tear where time still bleeds through. Hermione frowned. Where? He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. In the north, beyond the old forests, a place called Alderfin. People there speak of dreams that come alive, of memories walking in daylight. They say the world forgets itself every dusk and remembers again by dawn. Sound familiar? She felt a chill. The weave is faltering. Not yet, the man said, but it will. And when it does, you'll need to choose again. What to remember and what to let go. Before she could question him further, he rose, draping his cloak over one shoulder. The shard will guide you. It knows its home. Wait, she said, standing. You never told me your name. He paused at the door, the firelight glinting off his smile. Names are like memories, Miss Granger. They're only borrowed for a time. And with that, he was gone, leaving the smell of rain and the faint shimmer of fading magic. Hermione stood in silence, the shard warm in her palm. Outside, the wind howled across the cliffs, as though the sea itself whispered her name. She pocketed the glass and turned toward her room. Sleep did not come easily. When it did, it came filled with dreams that were not her own. Visions of a forest wreathed in fog, trees hung with silver threads that hummed softly like the weave itself. She saw figures moving among them, faces blurred, voices calling out in half-remembered songs. And then the forest split apart, light tearing through the mist, revealing a chasm in the earth where time itself seemed to pour like water. She woke before dawn, heart racing. The shard lay on the bedside table, glowing faintly, in rhythm with her pulse. She took it up and without hesitation set out for Alderfin. Days passed as she traveled north. The land grew wilder with every mile, the roads fading into tangled paths through ancient woodland. The air grew strange here, still yet heavy with unseen motion. Magic, old and restless, pressed at the edges of the senses. By the third day she began to notice it, the whispers, not voices exactly, but fragments of sound that brushed her thoughts like wind through leaves. Sometimes she thought she heard laughter, other times weeping, and once, just once, a voice that sounded very much like her own, calling her name from somewhere ahead. At dusk, she reached the outskirts of Alderfin. It was no longer a village so much as a memory of one. Stone cottages overgrown with ivy, wells gone dry, the faint smoke of hearths that might have been lit 100 years ago or only an hour before. The air shimmered faintly, as though the world here remembered itself imperfectly. She raised her wand and whispered, "Hominum Revelio." The spell revealed dozens of faint shapes, people moving in and out of existence like shadows caught between waking and dream. Each one flickered as though they were memories half recalled, living echoes of themselves. At the center of the square stood a tree, a vast oak, its bark threaded with veins of light. Beneath its roots, the earth pulsed faintly, the same rhythm as the shard in her hand. She knew then that this was the heart of the disturbance. She approached slowly. The air grew thick, heavy with magic. The shard quivered in her palm, pulling toward the tree. As she reached out, the ground shifted, and from the base of the oak, a figure emerged. He was not Myrrh, and yet, for a heartbeat, she thought she saw him. The same angular face, the same eyes burning with purpose, but this one was younger, uncertain, as though newly formed. His voice, when he spoke, trembled like wind through glass. "Who am I?" he asked. Hermione stared. "Your memory given shape." He tilted his head. "You made me, didn't you? When you bound the weave. I am what was left behind." Realization struck her. The weave had birthed an echo, an embodiment of what she had sacrificed. A guardian, or perhaps a warning. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, eyes shining like molten silver. "To know who I was? To remember?" Hermione's heart ached. "You were me," she whispered, "all that I let go." The echo stepped closer, the light around him flickering. "Then take me back. We are not whole without each other." For a moment she hesitated. The shard burned in her hand, the same silver light spilling from his form. To reunite with him would mean regaining what she had lost, but also risking the weave again. The world's balance could not bear it. She shook her head. "I can't." The echo's face darkened. "Then I will remember for you." He raised his hand and light burst from his chest, sweeping through the village. The shadows stirred, becoming solid. The air filled with the noise of 100 voices, 1,000 overlapping memories, trying to live again. The oak shuddered, its roots tearing through the ground. Hermione lifted her wand, shouting, "Finite Eternum!" The spell struck like thunder. The world convulsed, and the echo screamed, the light collapsing inward. When the brilliance faded, the square was still again. The shadows were gone. The oak stood quiet. Hermione knelt where the echo had been. In the soil lay only the shard, now dark and cold. She picked it up gently, closing her fingers around it. The silence that followed was deep and endless. "I remember enough," she whispered, and though the weave trembled faintly in the far reaches of time, it held, for now. The northern forests lay hushed beneath a pall of mist, the sky the color of faded parchment. Hermione walked beneath the great bare boughs of Alderfin's edge, the last of autumn's leaves crunching softly under her boots. The earth felt hollow here, as though it remembered the echo she had banished only nights before. Every step away from the village carried with it a strange silence. No bird called, no wind stirred the branches. The air itself seemed reluctant to move. Yet within that stillness the weave pulsed faintly, steady, alive, though no longer entirely calm. Hermione could feel it beneath her skin now, the rhythm of memory threading through her like a second heartbeat. The world's thoughts brushed her own in whispers, faces, names, emotions, fleeting sparks of other lives passing like drifting embers. It was not pain, it was weight,
The weight of remembering too much, she paused at a clearing and drew her wand. Tempus Revela. A circle of faint light formed on the ground. The grass shimmered as though touched by moonlight, revealing a pattern hidden beneath. The sigil of the weave itself, drawn in lines of silver and gold, its center cracked. The damage was small but unmistakable. The echo she had faced, the living memory, had not been destroyed. It had merely scattered. Each fragment of it drifted now through time, unmoored and hungry to belong. A flicker of frustration stirred within her. How many times must the world be mended before it learns not to break? A sound interrupted her thoughts, the creak of wood, the soft pad of footsteps. She turned, wand raised. Out of the mist stepped a stag, tall, luminous, antlers crowned with faint starlight. It stood at the edge of the clearing, watching her with eyes the color of the sea. There was something impossibly old in its gaze, something that stirred an ache she could not name. "Who sent you?" she whispered. The stag did not move, yet a voice echoed softly within her mind, deep and resonant. "No one sent me. You called, though you did not know it." Hermione lowered her wand slightly. "You can speak." "Only to those who listen," the stag replied. It stepped closer, its hooves leaving faint trails of silver light upon the grass. "You stand where time's threads cross," the weave phrase, "because it has no anchor." She frowned. "I restored the balance. You patched a wound," said the stag gently. "You did not heal the heart that made it bleed." Hermione's breath caught. "The heart? Memory does not live in stone or spell," the creature said. "It lives in what is loved. When love is lost, memory becomes shadow, and shadow's hunger." Understanding came like a tide. "The echo," she murmured. "It wasn't only my forgotten self. It was grief. All the grief I refused to feel." The stag inclined its head. "You cannot bind what you have not forgiven." Hermione's voice faltered. "Forgiven? Yourself?" The words struck like a wand blow. For a long time she said nothing. The forest around them seemed to fade, until there was only the quiet and the thrum of the weave beneath her heart. When she spoke again, her voice was small. "I did what I had to do. I chose to forget so others would not have to. I don't regret it." "You do?" the stag said softly. "Regret is only memory without mercy. And you've given mercy to everyone but yourself." Tears blurred her vision. She blinked them away, angry, ashamed of how fragile she felt. But the creature only stood there, patient as stone. "What would you have me do?" she asked. The stag bent its head, touching the cracked sigil with one shining antler. The ground pulsed with light. "There is a ritual older than any spell, older than the ministry, older even than Hogwarts. It was taught to the first guardians of the weave. It binds not through power, but through truth. Speak your own, and the weave will mend." Hermione sank to her knees. The light of the sigil brightened, swirling around her. The whispers of the world grew louder, the voices of the living and the dead, of all that ever was. Her throat felt tight, but she forced herself to speak. "I have spent my life trying to remember everything," she said quietly. "Every lesson, every loss, every reason to keep fighting. I thought that was what made me strong. But memory isn't strength, is it? It's weight." The light trembled, listening. "I am tired," she whispered. "Tired of holding on. Tired of being the one who never forgets." The air grew warmer, the sigil brightening until its glow wrapped her like sunlight. "I forgive myself,"
she said at last, the words breaking free like a breath she'd been holding for years. For the things I couldn't save, for the ones I couldn't protect, for all I had to forget. The weave flared with sudden brilliance, the crack at its center sealed, the silver lines fusing together in a pulse of light that spread through the forest like dawn. The mist dissolved. The air filled with birdsong for the first time in centuries. Hermione raised her head. The stag was gone. Only a few glowing hoof prints remained, leading toward the horizon. She stood slowly, feeling something inside her shift, a lightness, not of forgetfulness, but of release. The memories she carried no longer weighed her down. They moved within her like breath, quiet and whole. Above, the sun broke through the clouds, scattering gold across the trees. The weave's pulse softened, settling into harmony once more. Hermione turned south toward home. The journey back to London took 3 days. By the time she reached the city, winter had arrived. Frost clung to the windows of the ministry. The air sparkled with charm light from the enchanted street lamps. She walked through the atrium unnoticed, as though the world itself had forgotten to see her. A fitting irony. Kingsley met her outside the lift to the law enforcement floor. His smile, tired but genuine, warmed her more than the hearth behind him. "You look better," he said. "I feel lighter," Hermione admitted. He studied her carefully. "The reports from the north said the disturbances stopped. What did you do?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I remembered what it means to let go." He nodded, satisfied though he did not understand, and turned to leave. But before he did, he paused. "Hermione," he said, "do you ever wish you could forget?" She looked past him toward the high glass ceiling where snowfall drifted through the lamplight. "Sometimes," she said, "but then I remember why I can't." That night, in her quiet flat, she lit a single candle and opened her journal. She wrote no spells, no reports, no grand conclusions. Only a few simple words. Memory endures, not because it must, but because it chooses to. She closed the book, setting her wand beside it. Outside, snow fell over London, soft as sleep, and in the far north, where the sea met the cliffs, the faint shape of a stag moved through the mist, its antlers gleaming with threads of silver light. It did not look back. It did not need to. The weave was whole again. And so, at last, was she. Snow fell thick upon London that winter, muffling the city in a hush that felt almost sacred. The ministry towers gleamed pale beneath the dawn, their spires haloed in gold. Hermione walked those halls as one both part of and apart from them, present yet distant, her thoughts wandering to quieter places where memory slept. She'd become something of a legend since the Northern Mending, as the prophet called it. Whispers followed her, of storms stilled, of strange lights seen above Alderfen, of forgotten names restored to the records of the world. But Hermione never confirmed or denied. She only smiled faintly, offered her hand to the next case, the next task, and went about her work with the same unassuming diligence she always had. And yet, there were moments when the lamplight flickered a certain way or a familiar scent drifted past and she felt something tug deep within her. A ghost of laughter, a voice she couldn't quite recall, a warmth just beyond reach. They were fragments like sunlight caught on glass. She had learned not to chase them. It was on such an evening that she found herself wandering down to the Department of Mysteries once more. The corridors there were different now. sealed by layers of new magic. The echoes that once haunted them were gone. Still she went, drawn by something she couldn't name. The guards recognized her, of course, but said nothing as she passed. Few dared question Hermione Granger, though she never demanded their silence. The great circular door of the department stood before her, its runes pulsing faintly with blue light. She touched her wand to the surface. The stone parted soundlessly, and she stepped into the familiar dark. The Hall of Thought lay quiet. The broken mirrors she had shattered months before had been removed, replaced by smooth black panels that reflected nothing. In the center of the room, the pool of silver, the mind's mirror, still shimmered, its surface calm as moonlight. Hermione approached it slowly. Her reflection wavered on the surface, and for a heartbeat she thought she saw another face there, a younger version of herself, eyes bright with determination. Then the image steadied, and it was only her. "You've changed," she murmured to the still water. No answer came, of course, yet as she knelt beside the mirror, ripples spread across it. Soft, circular waves shimmered outward, and then a faint glow rose from the depths. She leaned closer. A shape began to form within the liquid light. A scene rather than an image. The Hogwarts library, dimly lit by floating candles. She saw herself there, much younger, bent over a table stacked high with books. A girl chasing answers because she believed all mysteries could be solved if one simply read enough, thought hard enough, cared enough. The sight made her smile. "You foolish, brilliant girl," she whispered. Another ripple, and the vision changed. The Gryffindor common room. Fire crackling, laughter in the air. Ron asleep in an armchair. Harry beside the hearth, polishing his broom. She felt the ache of it like sunlight on an old scar. A third ripple. The final battle. The noise, the light, the chaos. And then silence. The surface stilled. Her reflection looked back, eyes shining with tears. "It remembers," came a voice behind her. Hermione turned. Kingsley stood in the doorway, wand lowered, his expression solemn but gentle. "We kept it," he said. "Thought you'd want to see what remained. It holds echoes of those who touched it. Memories too strong to fade." Hermione nodded, her throat tight. "It's strange, isn't it? We fight so hard to remember, but the best things, they remember us." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps that's enough." For a long moment they stood in silence, the light of the mirror bathing them both. Then Kingsley spoke again, more quietly. "You've given a great deal to the world, Hermione, more than most ever will. But I hope you've kept something for yourself." She hesitated, then looked back into the mirror. Her reflection rippled once more, and she saw herself walking through the forest north of Alderfen, the stag beside her, the dawn breaking across the hills. "Peace." "Yes," she said softly. "I think I finally have." Kingsley inclined his head. "Then perhaps it's time you left the ministry behind. There's more to life than guarding the past." She smiled a little sadly. "Maybe, but someone must guard it still." He chuckled. "And you always will? But the world can remember without you now. You've taught it how." Hermione said nothing. She reached into her pocket and drew out the shard she had taken from the ruins, the last fragment of the old mirrors. Its surface gleamed faintly, still cool to the touch. She held it over the mind's mirror. "For everything that was lost," she whispered, and let it fall. The silver surface rippled once, then stilled. The shard sank into the depths, its light fading into the endless reflections below. That night she returned to her flat and packed a small trunk. Books, notes, a handful of keepsakes, a single enchanted quill, a photograph of 3 young friends, arms slung over each other's shoulders. She placed them all carefully inside. The next morning she sent her resignation to Kingsley with a short note. The world remembers. That is enough. She did not wait for his reply. By sunrise, she was gone from London. Months later, travelers on the western coast began to speak of a witch who lived by the cliffs in a cottage overlooking the sea. She tended an orchard that bloomed even in winter and was said to heal not with potions or charms, but by listening, really listening to those who came to her door. She kept no records, accepted no payment. Those who visited her often said they left, remembering things they thought they'd forgotten, small joys, lost hopes, names of loved ones long gone. The locals simply called her the Keeper. No one knew her true name, and she never gave it. But sometimes, when the winds swept in from the sea and the waves roared against the rocks below, they said she could be seen standing on the cliff's edge, watching the horizon with quiet eyes, as if listening to something far beyond the reach of the world. And if in that endless hush between tide and wind you listened very closely, you might hear a whisper carried across the water, a soft voice, gentle and unafraid. The key is to remain unnoticed. Years passed, and stories became legends. The weave endured, as all things born of sacrifice do. And somewhere in the eternal rhythm of time and memory, a woman who had once been Hermione Granger smiled in her sleep, unburdened at last by what she could not forget, and remembered only that the world, in all its fragile beauty, was worth saving. Spring returned to the cliffs in whispers, the hush of soft rain against stone, the scent of salt and new grass, the slow brightening of the sea beneath pale sunlight. The cottage stood at the edge of the world, small and weathered, its windows always open to the wind. Within, the fire burned steady, a single wand light glowing beside a stack of half-read books. Hermione had lived here for nearly 3 years. She had learned the rhythm of the tides, the quiet language of birds nesting in the eaves, and the comforting simplicity of days unmarked by urgency. To the villagers, she was still the Keeper, the woman who never aged, who healed by listening. Children brought her seashells, old fishermen came to her with their dreams. She gave little advice, only silence, and somehow that was enough. She did not speak often of her past, though sometimes she dreamed of it. The dreams were not always kind. In them, she wandered through the echoing halls of the ministry or along the moving staircases of a school whose name she no longer dared to say aloud. She would wake with tears on her cheeks, unsure if they were for joy or sorrow. On such mornings, she would walk to the cliffs, letting the sea wind tangle her hair. There, she would close her eyes and listen. Beneath the steady rhythm of waves, she could still feel the pulse of the weave, the soft hum of memory that threaded through all living things. It was weaker now, quieter, as though the world no longer leaned upon her to hold it. That was good. That was right. Yet one morning the air changed. It came not with thunder or storm, but with stillness. The sea went calm. The gulls ceased their cries. Even the wind fell away as if the world itself had paused to draw breath. Hermione stood at the door of her cottage, her heart quickening. She knew this silence. It was the silence that came before magic remembered itself. From the horizon, a faint shimmer began to spread, a silver thread unfurling across the sea, reaching toward her. The weave, answering her once more. She took a slow breath. "So," she murmured, "it begins again." The thread reached the shore and coiled around her feet like mist. It did not burn or chill. It only hummed softly, invitingly, and within that hum she heard a voice she had not heard in years. Hermione. The sound was faint, carried on the rhythm of the tide, but unmistakable. "Myrrh," she whispered. The name felt foreign now, distant as a forgotten dream, yet the voice persisted. "You bound memory to mercy," it said, "but mercy fades, as all living things do. The weave must be renewed." Hermione's fingers tightened around her wand. "You said you were gone." "Gone is not lost," the voice replied. "I exist only where memory lingers, and you, Keeper, have never truly forgotten me." A shiver passed through her. She had thought she had made peace with the past, thought she had released it. But some shadows cling not from hatred, but from need. "What do you want?" she asked. "Only to remind you that remembering is not the same as living." The mist thickened, rising higher. Shapes began to form within it, familiar faces flickering like candlelight. Harry, Ron, Kingsley, Luna, even Myrrh himself, the man he had been before the madness took him. Their voices wove together, calling her name. Hermione fell to her knees, trembling. The weave surrounded her, its light seeping through her skin, filling her with the weight of what she'd tried so long to set aside. "Please," she whispered, "I've done enough. I've given enough." "You have," the voices said, "but the world is made of stories, and stories need tellers. You are not its memory now. You are its voice." And suddenly she understood. The weave did not need a guardian any longer. It needed a witness, someone to speak what had been remembered so it would never fade again. She rose, the mist swirling around her. "Then let it be spoken," she said. "Let the world hear." The air blazed with light. Magic flowed through her, not the cold precision of spells, but the warmth of life itself. Her words came not from her mind, but from her soul, a story woven from all she had seen and all she had lost. She spoke of courage and sorrow, of the light that endured even when all hope had fled. She spoke of a boy who lived, of a girl who chose to learn rather than fear, of friends bound not by destiny but by choice. She spoke of memory and mercy and the fragile, fierce power of love. The words rose into the sky, carried by the wind, scattering across the world like seeds. And as they went, the mist dissolved. The weave quieted. Hermione sank to her knees, her strength spent, her vision filled with gold and shadow. When the light faded, she found herself once more by her cottage door. The sea moved gently again, the wind alive, the sky bright with dawn. In her hand she held something new, a small silver thread, warm to the touch. It pulsed softly, alive with quiet magic. She smiled faintly. "A story," she murmured. "The last one." That evening, a traveler came to the village, a young witch, barely 20, with ink-stained hands and eyes full of questions. She knocked at the keeper's door and found the woman sitting by the fire, a quill in hand, a parchment spread across her knees. "Forgive me," said the girl shyly, "but are you the one who helps people remember?" Hermione looked up, her eyes kind. "Sometimes," she said, "but only if they wish to." I think I've forgotten something important," the girl confessed. "Something that matters." Hermione smiled, gesturing to the chair beside her. "Then tell me what you do remember. Start with what you love." As the girl spoke, haltingly at first, then with growing ease, the firelight deepened and the air in the cottage grew warm
and full. Outside, the sea glimmered faintly with silver light. When at last the girl finished, Hermione reached into her pocket and drew forth the thread she had found. She held it out, letting it catch the glow of the fire. "Here," she said softly. "This belongs to you now, a reminder that what is forgotten is never truly gone, only waiting to be told again." The girl accepted it reverently, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "How can I repay you?" Hermione shook her head. "You already have. You remembered." Long after the girl had gone, Hermione sat before the fire, listening to the sea. The light of the setting sun spilled through the window, painting the room in gold. On the table before her lay an open parchment, the ink still wet. At the top, in her careful handwriting, she'd written, "The Chronicles of the Weave, Volume 1. She dipped her quill again and began to write, not as the keeper, not as the witch who had once fought wars of magic and memory, but as the storyteller she had become. Her words flowed steady and sure, weaving a tale the world would never forget. Outside, the first stars rose over the sea, their light reflecting off the calm water. And somewhere deep beneath the waves, the weave pulsed once as though in contentment. The story was not over, it never truly was. But for now, in this quiet moment at the edge of the world, Hermione Granger wrote the ending she had earned. It began, as all great things do, with a single, timeless truth. The key is to remain unnoticed.